The Octopus Hitman. Listener discretion advised.
Discovering your father is a killer shakes the very foundation of your identity. The realization not only forces you to confront his actions, but also challenges your understanding of morality, family, and the nature of evil itself. Once Pandora's box has been opened, the chaos unleashed is hard to contain.
And welcome to episode 3 of The Octopus Hitman. I'm your host, Bill, and on my left I have James.
Hello, everybody.
James is the researcher, so if you find something that's inaccurate here, it's probably his fault. I'm just letting you know.
It's probably very accurate.
Oh, yeah. And then the technical tiddly-whittler, it's Mr. Mark. How you doing, Mark?
I was better until just about 2 seconds.
You are
Mr. Diode. He's
right.
Mr. Diode.
He didn't want to be called Mr. Diode, so tiddly-whittler. I think that's a pretty good...
I think that's an excellent shirt.
He does all of the things, technically, in this podcast.
That he doesn't want to do.
That's right. You edit this podcast, so if you find that the pacing is off, it's probably Mark's fault.
Not enough cursing, Mark's fault.
So let's get into it. We just left you with episode 2. We talked about how I met Phillip Arthur Thompson as my biological father. Met him in 1999. And of course, just as a recap, my mother-in-law, when she was watching my kids, she answered the phone, and of course she said, no, we're not going to accept any calls from a penitentiary. And so I never talked to him and never really wanted to talk to him, right? I'm a vibe guy. He gave me bad vibes. So I'm like,
the call from jail is usually a good sign.
Yeah, no kidding, right? So I was like, okay. I didn't end up talking to grandma, his mother either, really. Just living my life. So now fast forward to 2007. I am working, and it just so happens that I'm working in El Dorado Hills, which is in El Dorado County. This is the same county that Phillip Arthur Thompson kills Betty Clore.
Where her body was found.
Exactly. So I'm working. It was kind of an intense job where it was just, I had to be focused all the time. And my wife, Emily, she calls me and she is like, what did you do? And I was like, well, what are you talking about? What did I do? And
that was a daily call for you from her.
Yeah,
right?
pretty much. Yeah. And so she was like, well, there just happens to be a business card in my door jamb, and it's from a detective from El Dorado County Sheriff's Department. And I was like, okay. And it says, it asks for you to call them. And I was like, I have no idea what you're talking about. And I don't think she believed me, honestly.
The fact that she started out with, what did you do?
Yeah, that says a lot.
Exactly. Oh, yeah. She's always thinking I'm up to something, but I'm not. I'm never up to
Which
anything.
is always true.
So now we're starting to see the genetic link.
So, in all honesty, I told her, yeah, okay, fine. I will call at lunch. I'll call at lunch because there's no way I could have called during my job. And she knows me so well. She knew I wasn't going to call because... So the only thing I could really think of, right, is that I was driving home one day maybe, and somehow I inadvertently cut somebody off. I had no idea that I did it. It caused an accident. Someone got my license plate, and they want to talk to me about it. I mean, that's the only thing that I could possibly think, and that's kind of bad news, right? So I don't want to call the cops and get more bad news, right? So it was just like, I don't need this right now. I have enough bad news in my life. So
I'm going to avoid the popo.
Exactly. I was going to call him, but it would have probably been like 4 days later.
Again, I'm recognizing the genetic link here.
Yes. Right. He's thinking only bad. Yeah. I did something wrong. I can't call
Avoid
the popo.
the popo.
I would call the popo right away. You're like, no.
I just didn't feel like it, So anyway, but maybe a half hour later, I get a call from Emily saying, I need to go to lunch with you. And I'm like, you called the cops, didn't you? You know? And she was
Well,
like,
is this a surprise after everything she's done previous?
no, it's not a
I'm
surprise.
surprised she wasn't like, did you call the cops yet? No, I didn't. Chicken. Are you chicken?
Right. Yeah. That's what I'm talking about. So she was very curious and she wanted to know. And, you know, she likes to know these things. So
What you had done.
So, right, exactly. So now she is like, I need to meet you personally. Well, can't you tell me what the cops said? And she's like, no, I'm telling you one-on-one. And to her credit, I think that she wanted to meet personally because she was going to give me some information that was going to be maybe sensitive to me. Although if you know me, it's just going to.
Still better in person than over the phone.
I guess I would have really rather had it over the phone.
You would have rather had text.
Yeah, exactly. So now I meet with Emily. She gives me the information that she talks to with the cops. And then I call the cops after that. I go back to work and I call the cops and talk to them. And so this is kind of the story. When you look at the media reports, it says that they discovered a cold case. So they told me that Phillip Arthur Thompson, of course, is in jail right now in El Dorado County for a suspected murder of Betty Clore. He had not been yet convicted. Thank you. So they were looking at a cold case and then it just came up. What the cops had told me is that he was about to get out of parole and they just have this system where they always run a DNA check. And when they did, it hit for the Betty Clore thing. So it doesn't matter which way it was, but I always like to tell their version because that was one of the things.
Right.
So, and before I tell you everything that they told me too, this is an interesting little bit of information. So I was talking to a detective and I was talking to like a deputy, like a senior deputy. Now they're feeling me out because they are calling me because they want to know who I am. They know that I've talked to Phillip Arthur Thompson in the jailhouse because there are records for that. You have to sign up to be able to make those phone calls,
right?
Visitations and stuff like that. So they were kind of trying to figure me out. Like they didn't know if I was pro-cop or anti-cop, you know.
Or you're working with Phillip Arthur Thompson on something else.
Exactly, right? And there's a lot of weirdness about the trial as well. There's some other people that they thought, are they trying to throw his trial? And there were journalists doing weird things. It was just crazy. So they're feeling me out. And it just so happens that the deputy, his father, was partners with my adopted father up in Mount Shasta. They were both CHP officers. And this is a guy, his dad, the deputy that I'm talking to, his dad I knew. And I went over to his house all the time. So there's probably a very good chance that I was over at his house and we played together as kids or something.
So let me get this straight. Your adopted father, Phil,
yes,
was a partner with this deputy's actual father, who was a CHP officer up in Mount Shasta.
Correct. Total coincidence.
That's a huge coincidence.
Yeah. But what was
all the cops in California?
Yeah. It was
in El Dorado too.
And of course I was able to say certain things that, you know, verified. You know, I knew what his house was like.
Sure.
I knew his dad's name. I said, wait a minute, is your dad this? And it was like, wow.
How did they find you?
They found me because of the records through the jail, right? I'm
Okay.
talking to them on the jailhouse, right? So you have to sign up.
Yep.
And all that stuff.
Okay.
Right? So that all of a sudden gives me credibility. They know I'm pro-cop. They know I am anti-Phillip Arthur Thompson. So now they're talking to me with a lot more leeway and there's, you know, a bond there. There's a trust.
And they're bringing you in. Why?
Well, they just wanted to know what role I was with Phillip Arthur Thompson because he had said things like, I have a son. And I took him horseback riding when he was 4. And we have a really good relationship.
Okay.
And, you know, I'm a great father. And they wanted to verify some of this stuff.
I'm wondering, you know, it's funny you said that. I'm wondering if, like, he's mixing the stories between the son that died with his wife.
That's unclear.
And yours.
Yeah, it's very unclear. But again,
Or he's just spinning a yarn.
Yeah.
Well, exactly. Don't believe a word he says.
He's just spinning a yarn.
I do believe, and they were very, very, I was like, well, there was, because I knew this information, right? He had a 4-year-old son, but how many 4-year-olds do you take horseback riding, number one? And then number two, they were adamant that he was talking about me. So I was like, well, I have never met him personally. I've only talked to him over the phone, and that was like twice. And so they're like, good to know. Thank you very much. Okay. And I think they also wanted to know, like, are you going to come in and throw something into the testimony, right? Because they were definitely trying to cross every T, dot every I, because they wanted to get this guy. So the Betty Clore trial, I think it was 2003 is when he was brought over to El Dorado County.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. Researcher, you have done your job. Correct. Okay, so he was sitting there between 2003 and 2007, and that's when he's starting to go on trial, 2007. My wife was a news junkie, and she saw this stuff, but it didn't connect because he was kind of out of sight, out of mind. And like later, she was like, yeah, I remember watching these newscasts. I am not a news junkie. So it's like, she was like, I can't believe that got by me. It went over her head, right? So basically what the cops tell me is that, yes, he has murdered Betty Clore. He's a very, very bad man. He is evil. And they said, we know that he is a serial killer. He is a serial rapist. He has worked for the CIA. He has been an FBI informant, and we still haven't ruled him out as the Zodiac Killer. Okay. So I am sitting there now. There, when we talk about surreal moments in your life, right? There's very few times where you actually get surreal moments. I've had it 3 or 4 times, but this was definitely one of those times, right?
You're like, wait, what?
So, and I don't know if you guys know, the Zodiac, the movie, had just come out. 2 weeks before, I had just watched this thing, the Zodiac, and I was like, this is so cool, the Zodiac Killer. Now I am being told by a professional detective police officer that this might be something.
There's a good chance.
Like, right? And I am like, I don't even know what to think. Right?
You're like, I didn't see him in the movie.
Yeah. So here he is, a serial killer. And again, we've been talking about him for a couple of episodes now, but it's like, you have to admit right now, the world is filled with true crime and serial killers, right? Everybody loves them, especially the ladies for whatever reason. Right?
Bad boys.
Yeah.
Bad boys, bad boys.
Right. But nobody has done anything on him because his ties to CIA and things like that. Right?
He's an enigma.
Exactly.
The information is lost.
Exactly.
You can go find a ton of information about Philip Arthur Thompson online. But the problem is, it's not provable. It's all hearsay.
Yeah, he's not linked like a lot of serial killers to multiple specific murders.
Hence why the
he
cops...
hasn't been convicted.
Well, hence why the cops were so careful to analyze you.
Yeah.
Because he seems to be a slippery criminal.
Right. He would be arrested for murder and then get out 3 days later, for good behavior or something crazy like that. Right. So he really is, like you guys say, an enigma. So I have to go back and work after this phone call. Right. That was kind of weird. And it's just like all I saw was like scenes of that movie in my head as I'm trying to work this intense job that I have. So I go back home and, I have to kind of like work this out in my head, but I have to work it out with certain people. So I was talking with my wife. Now, she was really worried because guess what, guys? When I was talking to him in the jailhouse, well, we've swapped pictures. I showed him pictures of my kids. And I showed him pictures of me. And he had my address.
Yeah, nothing's
right?
going to happen to you, though.
Right.
Serial killers aren't going after people in their own family, usually.
Well, he's in jail.
Right. And he's in jail. But that doesn't mean that my wife wasn't scared that he wasn't going to break out of jail and come and kill everybody.
True.
So she was very not happy about...
I could hear the conversation now. Bill, this is your fault.
Exactly. Probably wasn't the smartest thing, I guess. Right?
I know I would give you a ton of crap.
Hold on. She's the one who pressured you into getting a hold of your father when you didn't want to begin with.
True, but she did not sign off on the pictures. I'm like, it's fine. He's, he stole some Oriental rugs.
If somebody wants to kill you, they'll find you whether they have a picture or not.
Exactly. And let me just say this. The cops did reassure me. They said, listen, this is a guy who, if he wants something from you, he will take it and kill you. He doesn't want anything.
Yeah,
from
exactly.
You have nothing that he wants.
Yeah.
You know, he doesn't want a bunch of grandkids sitting on his lap or anything. Right?
He doesn't want those dogs that you have.
No, and I had 4 vicious dogs at the time, so I wasn't. Actually, honestly, I wasn't worried at the time. I had 4 vicious dogs.
I think it's amazing that this person, your biological father, was such a criminal that he's on the top of the list, but he wasn't one made public.
Exactly.
Because he was
like,
a suspect.
But they
in a
were
lot of
analyzing him left and right all over the place.
Yeah.
They've linked him to a million things, but they've never made it public.
He's got a big rap sheet.
And that's the reason why the cops are calling me, right? They just don't want him to get away again. They just don't want that to happen.
Wow.
So the other thing that I had to reconcile, right, is that, well, I had a birth mother, and I'm a pretty transparent guy, so I had to make the awkwardly weird phone call of, hey, you know that guy that you had a baby with?
Me?
Guess what? He's a serial killer. And guess what? There's more, right? So I made that phone call, but my mom is so chill. I mean, she is so chill. The very first thing she says, well, just so you know, you take after me. That's what she says to me.
Aww.
Right? And you got to give her credit. She's thinking about me and how I might feel, right? You know? So I was like, okay, right. So she was like, well, just so you know, I didn't really see any signs of that. Like, she had always made him out to be kind of like a Letterman sweater and a real good clean cut kind of guy. And, you know, I mean, obviously charming and charismatic. So she saw what she wanted to see, but he was already doing bad things right around.
She just didn't see it.
He was doing petty criminal behavior.
Yeah. Well, and other stuff too. Yeah.
But then within 5 years, something flipped.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, exactly. Which
He just, I don't know, it flipped. He just graduated. He got more experienced.
He
and
graduated.
You're a young fledgling criminal. You do bad checks and bad stuff, and then you're smart and you realize, this sucks. I'm going to do worse stuff.
He had the criminal Letterman sweater on.
yeah, with a big C. Crime. So, you know, she took it well, my mom. She was like, oh, yeah, well, I guess that she did not like him. So she was like, there's another reason to stay away from him, that kind of thing, right? So I'm like, okay, that's great. But it was something for us to talk about it, you know, when we did our annual St. Patrick's Day reunions. It was definitely interesting, right? So,
Gosh, Mom, I guess you're lucky you weren't killed.
yeah. Well, that's what I'm thinking, right? So then the other thing you have to kind of reconcile with is like, well, I had kids at the time. Do I tell them? Well, they were all under 18 at the time. So my wife and I, we were just like, we are not telling them that. It's like sometimes I think when kids get information like that, they think, well, maybe I have this in my genes, or maybe I'm evil, or maybe it's my fault, or whatever it is that a kid will make up in their head. So we wanted to tell them when they were old enough to really...
A little more mature.
Yeah, their brains were more developed,
Yeah.
right? So now fast forward, I'll tell you how that worked out, which was my wife and I, we had gotten divorced. So we...
Was it because your father's a serial killer?
Yeah, she was like, I cannot handle the evil in you. And she just dropped me like a rock, right?
I say that on a weekly basis.
So we kept that pact. We're not going to tell them. And then basically when my youngest turned 18, we have 4 kids. We sat him down at the pizza parlor because I think we were both afraid.
The pizza parlor.
Well,
Yeah.
you know, see this cheese? Look at the tomato sauce. It's kind of like skin and blood.
See that big rat?
Well, keep in mind, we're divorced, so we're not going to go to her house and we're not going to go to my house. It has to be neutral site, right? But we told them fairly quick. Yeah, I guess a park. Look at the bunny rabbit.
Yeah.
Your grandfather killed a bunny rabbit.
Well, they might be scarred. They can't smell pizza for the rest of their life. It's a bad...
Well, the other thing is that we were, I think we were both afraid that one would tell the other because we weren't you know, together. So we told it pretty soon as my daughter turned 18. And then the way we told it was, you know, I mean, you can kind of tell by just this podcast, I'm a pretty casual, fun guy. I think it's a funny story.
Not really.
You know, I mean, it's scary and
It's
creepy.
tragic. It's horrific.
Yeah. But I mean,
I wouldn't describe it as funny.
yeah, but I think it's funny, right? So, I mean, I think it's quirky and weird. And, you know, so I presented it that way. And my kids took it that way. And they're like, this is and then they would just call him, they always refer to him as Grandpa Zodiac now. So that's, what they say. So go back again. I drive home 2007. I'm right there. And my wife and I, we are like looking at each other going, we got to know more about Phillip Arthur Thompson. So now the internet is way more developed. It's 2007. And we start going down what we have experienced ourselves, right? It's called the rabbit hole. And we started going down every single rabbit hole you could find. So first of all, there's a lot of amateur sleuths out there. So there's lots of message boards thinking that he might be the murderer of this or the murderer of that. And it just goes on and on and on. And then you start going down these dark websites, the dark web or whatever, and then you start finding stuff like the octopus, just like we had talked about before, the octopus murders. This is kind of what set this podcast in
all the connections.
Right. And the octopus, it is so many tentacles. We started going down every tentacle of the octopus, and my biological father is not involved in every tentacle, but he's involved, and it starts going crazy. And in this documentary, we have the documentary that you see on Netflix features Danny, and he is the journalist who made the octopus name. He was investigating one murder, and he started figuring all this out. Well, he was murdered when he started getting too close to this stuff. And as you go through the octopus, you find many people getting murdered when they find out more about the octopus.
Asking the wrong questions.
So,
and they never catch the people who are murdering these people.
No, they never catch them. It's always like, boy, he committed suicide with
a wire.
Yeah, right, exactly.
With a cracker in a tub.
Yeah, it's always under weird circumstances after he just met with a henchman in the closet or whatever. So it's
if I don't come back from this meeting, I didn't commit suicide.
Exactly. He would write stuff like that, right? So when you get down this, and we have started to really get this way too, you start to get a little paranoid because we are talking about secret government agencies.
Yep.
And if you know something that they don't want you to know, you just get murdered. So I got paranoid. I'm not even going to lie.
Well, and we haven't even went down those roads with the listener yet.
We haven't.
We haven't even touched base. I mean, you're pulling the curtain back from the Wizard of Oz going, don't look behind the curtain. Nothing to see. Just keep moving.
Exactly. And I told my wife, who is a super sleuth herself, I was like, stay off the message boards. Do not reply. Do not do anything, because this is getting scary. And she, for the first time, agreed with me, right? It was like, yep, we are leaving this. And I think we went down it for 2, 3, 4 months, right?
Hold on a second. This is the first time in your entire marriage she agreed with you?
Oh, yeah. That was the only time.
Now I can see what happened.
Yeah, exactly, right? So, I mean, we were both a little paranoid, but this is what you do when you go down this rabbit hole. And you're connected to it personally, right?
And if you watch the Octopus Murders, they say the same thing.
Oh, yeah.
The producers, the narrators, they say, this is crazy. Should I believe this? Should I even pursue it?
In that kind of world, there's lots of shady folks. And there's information they don't want to get out. And so, you can be killed for it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and people just disappear.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I talked to one of the guys in the documentary, and he was like, where we research in my house was in walking distance, and I'd be at night, and I'd be walking home, and it's like I'd hear something in the bushes, and I'd be freaking out that somebody was going to assassinate me.
Yeah.
And that's just what happens. It's like you go where your mind goes, and if your mind is going down rabbit holes in secret government agencies, it's crazy.
And everybody in that is paranoid themselves, so that makes you paranoid.
Right.
Yeah. So it's kind of a tantalizing tidbit for the listener. We're not talking about this stuff right now, but we're going to be talking about it more moving forward.
Oh, yeah. So then, bingo, we know at this time that Phillip Arthur Thompson gets convicted. I believe it's 2008.
2008.
For Betty Clore's murder. And so I'm very much aware of this
April,
now.
I believe.
Okay, there you go. So it was like, great, he's been put away. But I get a call from the cops a couple of years later. Maybe it's 2009 now or something like that. And they are calling me. Now the detectives have changed. And they forgot. They didn't write notes. And they don't remember what my role is with Philip Arthur Thompson. But why are they calling me? Well, they are calling me because he is up for parole already, like so quickly. And they wanted to know, like,
how? Again, how?
Well, in this case, there's an explanation for it.
Yeah.
So,
welcome to the legal system.
So the explanation why he was up so quickly is that there used to be a law in California that if you got arrested for a crime that was committed in the 70s, you had to serve with the 1970s laws at the time. So the laws at the time in the 1970s was you murder somebody and you're up for parole in 2 or 3 years or whatever it is.
4 to 5 maybe, right?
Yeah, or whatever it is. Yeah. So now they are calling me because he's up for parole and he has been talking to a psychologist and he is saying, I am rehabilitated. I don't want to kill anybody. I don't want to do any crime. And then I wasn't going to go to the parole board and testify and say, like, they didn't know if I was like a business owner and said, hey, I've got a job for him and he's got a place to stay and we're going to take care of him. And they want to make sure of that. And I said, well, no. I told them my situation. They're like, oh, great. You're on our side. This is great. And there's not going to be any surprises. And I was like, yeah. So they were telling me about the psychologist and she was brand new. And she's like, this guy is great. He's fine, you know? And this is the problem with psychology, right? It's like self-proclamation. Yeah, I'm fine. I'm not going to do anything. Okay, your self-assessment. You're good. But he's charming enough, and he lies so well.
But that's his MO.
Exactly.
That's what he's done his entire life. That's why all these women...
Well, if you're charismatic, you can get people to believe just about anything.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, he's been fooling her, and she is going to go do a positive parole board review with this guy. So we don't want any, you know, they're making sure he stays in jail. So they didn't parole him. But in between that time, they made legislation specifically because of him to change that rule in California that you had to go by old laws in the 1970s.
Yeah, because remember at the time, he's still the first DNA case like that.
Exactly.
So it's still fledgling and new of how they're going to prosecute.
Yeah, exactly. The new law had gone into effect, but he still got to go up for probation. This was many years later. But I guess how it worked was he walked in and they just started hitting him with all of the stuff. And it was a very negative review. And he couldn't even handle it. He just got up and walked out in the middle of his parole. He knew he wasn't going to get paroled and he just walked out. So, which made me happy. It's like,
it's where you belong.
Yeah, he belongs in jail. So then after that parole hearing, I got a call from the cops saying, you know, he's in for life. He's never going to be paroled again. He's never going to hurt anybody. And then I'm thinking, okay, great. He is in my rear view mirror. Or at least I thought. So now we're here during this podcast. And it just keeps going and going and going and going.
Yeah, because it's such an interesting story. That's why.
There's so many individual stories connected to him.
Exactly. We're going to have a hard time pacing them for everyone and explaining what's going on because it is so convoluted.
Yeah, because in real life, things happened on a timeline.
Yeah.
But that timeline isn't known to anyone but the people involved.
And as you said, there's not exactly proof against him and everyone. A lot of it's alleged. He was kind of involved, but there's no smoking gun.
Or he was there, but did he do it?
Yeah.
Right.
And the only people who could tell us are either dead or they're quiet and not going to tell us.
Or they're counterintelligence and they're telling us lies and truths to confuse us.
Exactly.
Right? So,
yeah.
It's going to be a ride.
So get ready. Octopus Hitman, episode 4 coming up.